Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to another episode of the Mindful Muslim podcast, where we are joined by the amazingly knowledgeable Dr. Hooman. Assalamu alaikum. How are you doing? Welcome to the UK, and thank you so much for collaborating with us as we are trying to tackle religious OCD for our theme this year. So without further ado, I'll let you introduce yourself for our viewers.
Sure. No, I mean, first of all, thank you for the invitation. It's definitely an honor, and also being in the UK for my second time, but this time I'm really getting an opportunity to sort of interact with the community. And it's kind of amazing how this came together when you guys had the theme aligned for your work that you want to focus on around religious OCD, and right at the same time when we're working on similar things, and we just released the book. So how did that? It's kind of, divine alignment. So,
we came across your book actually and decided we absolutely have to reach out, because this is an area that we have seen growing in the last couple of years. And our statistics show that as well. So we definitely thought this is an area that we want to work with. And you are part of the Khalil Center. So you're going to tell us a bit more about the
Absolutely. Yes, Khalil Center started off in 2010. So I'm the founder and executive director of Khalil Center. And so, the initial idea was that we recognized that, American Muslims and Muslims in Western countries, and even and many parts of the world, even including the Muslim world where I work currently as well, we find that they're less or more reluctant to seek out mental health care than other populations. And one of the things that we noticed is that part of the reason why they're reluctant is because many Muslims want mental health care delivered through an Islamically integrated perspective. They want spirituality. They want religion to be an important part of the treatment process. And so they actually are looking for individuals who possess those competencies. And because it wasn't widely available, we had to sort of divide between professionals, Muslim professionals, or just professionals who are not Muslim. And in the US, we would often see them moving more towards imams, and they would work from mental health professionals, despite the fact that they're dealing with mental health issues, not necessarily spiritual issues.
Just bringing their phone up in the middle of the night and I'm going through this,
or just continuously showing up at their office. And, and of course, imams are not necessarily trained to do this, and it's not very expertise, nor do many communities or offices get set up that way, with some exceptions. Certainly some imams may have got kind of experience on the job doing it for a long time and gotten pretty good at it. But there's really nothing that prepares imams to deal with mental health conditions, particularly because I've, gone through religious training, Islamic studies, to be a part of this curriculum and be on the receiving end of Islamic studies curriculums as well, to know that this does not exist in our religious studies curriculums. And so that kind of got me thinking about this need to sort of bridge these two worlds. And despite the fact that we may not necessarily cover it in Islamic studies curriculums, because obviously you can only cover so much and there's a focused sort of objective, I came across so much literature, right, in Islamic tradition around mental health, psychology, and treatment and whatnot. And so that inspired me even more to want to make this bridge more and more a reality. And so that culminated eventually in the formation of Khalil Center, where I just started to offer this kind of on my own, and then I was shortly joined with my friends and colleagues, and subhanAllah, it's grown to become the largest provider of mental health services in North America, with over 50 practitioners, over 90 staff, with 5 different offices, and then even international work, because I'm in Istanbul currently, teaching in the program and working with the students there, as well as now recently as well, a kind of a recent development, also consulting for the development of a similar program, but in Istanbul. And so that inspired me to want to really a graduate program in Islamically integrated psychology and MOPA at Haldun University. So you can kind of see it's really taken off a lot more quickly than I would have imagined, but it really does speak to 13 years ago when we're looking at the quote-unquote stigma that people don't want to come, but that when you realize that you provide treatment in a way that really speaks to a need, like you speak to the barrier, and you lift that barrier through a facilitator like spirituality integrated mental health, you see that the floodgates kind of just opened up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
SubhanAllah, SubhanAllah, you're doing amazing work. Are any plans to come to the UK?
Yeah, well, certainly I'm open to coming. I enjoy the UK myself. Communities, wonderful. So we'll see wherever almost kind of takes us.
But moving a bit onto religious OCD, so there's a lot of confusion about what it is. I know a lot of Muslims experience it in some form or another. So can you just shed some light, or generally, what is religious OCD?
Yeah.
What are the symptoms that Muslims typically experience?
Yeah, so OCD, there's a subtype of OCD called OCD scrupulosity, or in other words, religious OCD. And I'll get to what we kind of call that in Islamic terms, or in Muslim cultures, what we refer to that. Simply waswasa, but I'll kind of delineate what that is. But OCD is really like two major parts. It starts with these obsessions and intrusive thoughts that are uncomfortable, that people generally don't want. And it generates in them a fear, right? A fear of some catastrophe that may or may not happen, or the loss of something valuable. For example, an individual, when it comes to what we call scrupulosity, this is the overlap or intersection between religion or their religious beliefs and their condition of OCD. Their obsessions become fixated on things like, wudu, did I make wudu properly? Did I pray properly? And that they may, wonder, feel anxious about that. Oh, did I make a statement of kufr? Did I think of lots of thought and then did that communicable? Some, did I accidentally divorce my wife, for example? Character defects, I thought of something evil. Does that mean I'm an evil person? And so oftentimes it's about trying to get rid of these thoughts that feel very uncomfortable, that they don't want. And some of the ways that people try to address these thoughts and the anxiety that's generated. For example, somebody says, I don't know if I did my wudu properly, I missed the spot. Oh, wait, that means that my prayer is not accepted if I didn't have this wudu. And therefore, if my prayer isn't accepted, that's the first thing I'm going to be asked by the Day of Judgment about. And therefore, I'm going to go to hell. It becomes very scary. And so I need to then go back to this compulsion. Compulsion is this thing that forces you to do something against your better judgment. And what I mean by better judgment is oftentimes individuals may know, people with OCD, that, wait a second, this is excessive. This doesn't make sense. Like, other people are able to pray properly, make wudu, and they don't repeatedly, they go back and question them all the time. But I actually, you rationalize, you realize this makes sense. But they feel this compulsion. I have to go back. I'm not going to feel comfortable, and I need to be safe and secure. I'd rather be safe than sorry, so that they go back and they make wudu again. But it just opens other possibilities. Once you enable this condition, the larger it gets and it snowballs, and you go from making one extra wudu to 2 to 3 to 4 to 15, and make it wudu again, bring your salah again. Some people spend hours being engaged in this process, despite the fact they know this doesn't make any sense, and they feel very burdened and overwhelmed by it. And so this is kind of what we mean by OCD, is that the criterion diagnostically is that, the compulsions need to last for at least 1 hour plus in order to qualify, and it needs to create significant dysfunction.
That's very interesting. Just as you were sharing that, I was thinking, we're talking about how Islam kind of integrates, into mythology and how religious OCD presents. And I was just wondering, have you come across any particular case studies that you can share that can highlight where does this come from? Because I'm sure a lot of people who are struggling with religious OCD just have to tell why.
Yeah.
Why am I struggling with this? Where does it come from?
Yeah, no, this is a really, really important question. So maybe we can just kind of talk about distinguishing normal from abnormal OCD or waswasa. And this is what I want to talk about as well. Waswasa is whispers that come from Shaytaan, generally called it waswasa. And they do come from the Shaytaan, so we believe that these are metaphysical whispers or voices that come from the Shaytaan. But they come in, and everybody experiences it, like every Muslim experiences to some degree, right? Like the Prophet said, Shaytaan usually, it's I can mention it them, right? That Shaytaan kind of flows in the body of the human being like the blood and bloodstream, right? And so Shaytaan is going to whisper, right? And there's a specific Shaytaan for prayer and wudu, for example, that's a sign. And so Shaytaan will come and make these whispers, but for the average person, they kind of shake it off. They get the feeling and they realize, oh, this is a whisper of Shaytaan, this doesn't make sense, and they don't proceed to repeat the wudu. But there are some individuals who may have a propensity to being slightly more nervous or anxious and a little bit more, OCD-ish, sometimes I can say individuals who are preoccupied with rituals that, pre-existed, maybe affecting their religiosity, not stepping on cracks and making sure that everything has to be a certain way and checking things over and over again and each rituals. And for those people who have this propensity, Shaytaan comes and whispers this, and then they think, oh no, it's a catastrophe. There's truth to this, and I need to respond to this.
It's so it's related to the religious.
Yeah, and they magnify it, and they respond to it. And the difference between the average person and the person who doesn't experience OCD is that people, just general, also says we all have, just kind of shake it off. Like sometimes I tell my patients, I say, the difference between you and I is not that we don't have, it's not that I don't have similar thoughts that you do. And then he said, you also have intrusive evil thoughts. And I said, yeah. And then he said, oh, I think I came to the wrong psychologist. It's like, it sounds like you also have such issues.
Right.
I said, no, everybody has these thoughts, but the difference between you and I is that I'm not afraid of them. Like they just occur as background noise, as Shaytaan was from Shaytaan. Whereas for you, they're imminent, they're a danger, they're a threat. So you're afraid of your own thoughts. You're afraid of the thoughts of what you're like. That's a fundamental difference. So you're very sensitized to this, and then you respond to it, which creates this kind of vicious cycle. So it oftentimes people have somewhat of a genetic predisposition. Not always. It may also be environmentally induced, like somebody grew up in a very restrictive family or an abusive family, or they may have grown up in an environment that was kind of very inducive to obsessive compulsive kinds of behaviors. Their mom was doing this a lot, or an uncle was doing this a lot. That was a learned behavior, right? And so it can vary to a degree, but oftentimes people have sort of some way of being trained or habituated to respond to distress this way, and that they learn to react with some set of compulsions or rituals to extinguish the anxiety that they feel.
And that learning kind of has impacted every facet of their life and so on. So it's kind of like a process of unlearning a lot of things that you unconsciously picked up.
Absolutely.
So I feel like that's a lot of information that can make you feel a bit hopeless. So let's focus on the hopeful part of the conversation. What are the treatment options? What do people do when they realize, okay, I'm experiencing this. This is a form of scrupulosity.
Yeah.
What's available?
Yeah, I mean, well, the good news is we just published this book, right, by Claritas Publishing House. And so this is a very exciting development in, Muslim mental health literature. We didn't have stuff like this in the past, and alhamdulillah, now we do. And so we just published this book on waswasa, OCD, scrupulosity. And so individuals who, I want to say, have like subclinical elements of OCD, waswasa, or...
Can you just define that for us?
Yeah, subclinical meaning that it's not overly dysfunctional, meaning that they can go to work, they can go to school, they can do their homework, they can have, relationships with their family members in a reasonably healthy way, but they just take a really long time. Maybe also they take a really long time with prayer. They may have a tendency to kind of repeat a lot. Those people, in mild, cases of clinical OCD, where it takes them some time, on an hour or two total a day, but it doesn't significantly impair their life entirely. These people can perhaps go through the workbook and find a lot of benefit that may curb some of this for them. But the most idealist way of doing this is to do it with support, and to do it with ideally a mental health professional who is familiar with OCD and how to work with it, almost a mental health professional that knows about the intersection of these two, and can potentially work with the workbook and help use that as an aid to the psychotherapy and counseling process. If that's not available, now it's more and more available under the online space, but let's say that's not available for some reason or another to somebody, perhaps a chaplain who works with counseling cases, maybe skilled and experienced EMAP, has worked with a lot of cases and is familiar with this stuff, that you could have him help you walk through the workbook together, for example. So these are kind of ways that individuals can work with this stuff and help themselves. But in severe cases, it really absolutely requires professional help. You're not going to be able to just read the book and get over it, or get some sort of communal support. You absolutely need professional help. And even in some cases, you may need psychiatric assistance as well, especially when it becomes very, very severe, because that's when we get into a very clear biological predisposition or biological element to this that may not be all that responsive to psychotherapy, or, sort of learning the appropriate ways of thinking and behaving with regard to OCD. Imagine the compulsion. I feel this compulsion, and the stronger the compulsion, the more, you need to escalate the levels of professional care that you may need.
And so on the back of that, I'm just thinking, firstly, thank you so much for publishing this book, for undertaking research in this area, and for training our counselors. So most of our IAM counselors now are receiving this training, so we can, be in a better position to help the overall alhamdulillah. Just to close, finally, I would like to ask for your advice, and not only advice for people who are struggling with religious OCD, but advice for anyone who is in the position of supporting someone with religious OCD. What advice would you have?
Yeah, so sometimes somebody supporting or taking care of somebody with mental illness, we underestimate the impact of and burden of this process for them. This can be very frustrating because you often witness individuals with very unreasonable or irrational behaviors, and you're not able to understand why. And you just think it's a simple fix. Hey, stop doing that, or I'm not going to let you have access to water or not. Sometimes it can create a lot of frustration, fights, person feeling very not understood, ostracized, and then very much so frustrated on the other end, because there might be the wife or the husband of this individual, or the mother, or the sibling, whose life has been made difficult because of this individual as well. They can't go anywhere, or they can't leave the house, or they're having to clean up after them and whatnot because of all the issues. A great degree of patience is going to definitely be needed, but sometimes some of their own support and mental health. And definitely, I would say this, that do not try to treat this as a family member, because, people with OCD are not responsive to family members trying to intervene and stop them. In fact, it just generates further relational problems between them, and it may further enable the condition of the individual. So it's best if, even if they say all the right things, it may not come best from that. It may need to be taken to a professional assistance.
So being that kind of supporting hand and like helping them get the right kind of help.
Jazakallah khair for watching and listening to this episode of the Mindful Muslim podcast. Inshallah, you found it a useful one, and I will see you on the next one.